What's going on, all you GPU addicts? You know that's who's watching this video. You guys are as big of a GPU whore as I am. It's okay to admit it. You guys have been asking me on Twitter and Facebook and anywhere else you could get my attention to please review a 380X. Well, that's exactly what we're doing today, and I'm sure you already knew that because I hope you read the title. The flavor of today's 380X is going to be specifically the Sapphire 380X Nitro, which is a factory overclocked, just a behemoth of a card. This thing's actually pretty big and weighty given what it is. But anyway, we're going to check this guy out today. We're going to see how it stacks up in the AMD lineup, and we're going to talk about this card, where it belongs, and whether or not you should even bother looking at a 380X. I mean, hopefully by the end of this video, you can answer that for yourself. From November 26th through December 7th, get amazing discounts on CaseLab's most popular cases like the STH10, TH10A, S8, SM8, S5, X2M, or my personal favorite, the SM88. Now, even though these cases are built ahead of time via their quick ship sale, CaseLabs knows that no case is one size fits all, so builders can still fine-tune their setups by selecting key options such as radiator mounts, flex bay options, drive mounts, and much more. Oh yeah, and all case accessories are 50% off during this sale. So if you've always wanted your own CaseLabs case, act now and take advantage of huge savings by clicking the link down in the description. So here it is right here, the Sapphire R9 380X. Now the 300 series launched back in June, which also launched alongside the new Fury line of, Fiji cards like the Fury X. And the R9 380X is kind of a weird card if you ask me, specifically because of how big the AMD lineup already is. In fact, that lineup consists of the 360, 370, 380, 380X, 390, 390X, the R9 Nano, the R9 Fury, and then the R9 Fury X. That's a lot of graphics cards in one lineup. So it's kind of interesting about that they chose that markup or that position in the lineup to actually put a stopgap card, which is really what the 380X is. Now, obviously, being a 380X, I expect performance to be somewhere between the 380 and the 390. I think that should be pretty obvious is why it's a 380X. So the 380X obviously is going to have higher specs than the 380 and lesser specs than the 390. But the Sapphire Nitro Edition, this thing here's a Nitro card, guys. We're going to go ahead and push it to the limits. Yep. But no, the Nitro cards are featuring obviously higher than base specs. So for instance, this thing is from the factory is up to 970 megahertz on the core clock. However, the Nitro is doing 1050 megahertz, so it is a factory overclocked card. It is a 28 nanometer GPU die in here, and it has 2048 stream processors, which is 256 more than the 380. It's got 4 gigabytes of GDDR5, which is going to be more than enough for pretty much any 1080p game, even games that are VRAM intensive like Skyrim with mods or Shadow of Mordor. It's got a DVI-I, DVI-D, an HDMI, as well as a DisplayPort. Now for power delivery, it does require two 6-pin PCI Express power. It is a PCI Express 3.0 card, obviously, and we've got two massive fans on here with a heatsink that runs the entire length of the card, as well as this being a custom PCB. This is not a reference PCB, so it is larger than the standard 380, which makes it kind of beefy and kind of heavy. Now the back, obviously you can see, we've got a backplate. I got EVGA to start including backplates on their cards, and now we've got Sapphire, who pushed against my saying you need backplates just for the aesthetic benefit of keeping up with competitors. Well, look at that. They told me they didn't need to do backplates, and here we are. That's a big deal. In fact, they even put a big sticker right on the front of the box that says backplate. All right, guys, let's keep the backplate movement going. If you guys know of any companies out there that are not including backplates on their cards, let me know and we'll send the Jay's Army after them. Now the factory TDP of the card is only about 175 watts. This thing, because it is factory overclocked, is going to be pushing out a little bit more TDP than that, which I think the massive cooler with 4 copper heat pipes on here, as you can see, is going to do a fantastic job at keeping this thing cool. What also, again, I give huge kudo points to Sapphire for doing is they do also include the VRAM as well as the power delivery as an actively cooled part by this heatsink. It is being, the main heatsink with the heat pipes is touching the VRM on this thing, which is going to help keep the VRMs cool. VRMs, believe it or not, when it comes to overclocking, if they're not kept nice and cool, can introduce instabilities and artifacts and all sorts of damaging ways to hurt your card by not keeping the VRMs cool. And if you guys notice the lights kind of going up and down and up and down, we've got clouds, these big poofy white things going by in California. They must be on their way somewhere else. They don't usually stick around, but damn it, They keep blocking out the sun and messing up my lights. Now before we get into the benchmarks, one thing I want to go ahead and just nip in the bud is when I put this thing up on Instagram and said that it's one of the sexiest coolers I think on the market, a lot of people were pretty much really harsh and said, well, that just looks like an ACX copy. It looks just like EVGA's cards. If you think this cooler looks anything like the ACX, except for the fact that it has 2 round fans, which blade design aren't even the same, then please go get some glasses, get an eye exam or a head exam, because you cray-cray. Obviously, there's only so many designs you can do in a rectangular shape like this, but I think Sapphire did a really good job at keeping this thing aesthetically its own. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of things you might be able to say maybe kind of look like the ACX, but I don't think that's true at all. This thing looks entirely different. Even the backplate looks amazingly unique on its own. All right, enough yammering. Let's go ahead and put this thing on the test bench. Let's see how it performs. And by the way, we are running the newest 15.11 Crimson driver on this thing. So I have no idea how it would have performed when I first got it, because I went ahead and redid the benchmarks with the Crimson drivers, simply because I didn't want to put this video out and have people be like, you didn't use the latest drivers, Jay. So yeah, 15.11 Crimson is the drivers that we're using for this test bench. Without further ado, cue the transition.
Transition.
Now, the only reason I even included the 970 in this benchmark is I know a lot of people were going to ask me, how does it compare to a 970? Now, the thing is, the 970 is much more expensive than this card, so obviously it should perform better. So the only reason it's in there, I didn't even want to put it in there, is I know if I didn't put it in there, people were going to ask me, well, how did it compare? So take that for what it is. But obviously it fits in between the 380 and the 390 exactly where I thought it would. What was interesting is that an overclocked 380 pretty much came like right up against the baseline of where the 380X was at stock speeds, at least with the factory overclock. But keep in mind that all 3 of the AMD cards in those graphs that you saw, the 380, the 380X, and the 390 are all Nitro series cards. So they all pretty much have about the same level of factory overclock applied to all of them on the base numbers, which is why I'm happy that Sapphire sent me all 3 of the Nitros, you know, obviously with the exception of the 390X, so that I could give you guys pretty consistent baseline improvements between all 3 of those cards. One other thing to keep in mind in these benchmarks, especially with like Witcher 3 and Crysis 3, is my benchmarking suite has the settings set to like ultra, whatever the max settings are for these games. And the reason for that is you're gonna see what the worst case scenario FPS is on these games. So obviously games like Crysis 3 and Witcher 3, if we were to reduce those graphics down to say medium, then it would perform just fine and you would get the 60 FPS that you were after. So if you're looking at even 1440p gaming at medium or high, it's very capable of that, especially games like Battlefront. Has no problems running Battlefront, even though I don't have it in the test benching suite. Words are hard, guys. Words are hard. Then you could certainly play it at very, very high frame rates. The game is not very demanding, but holy hell is it beautiful. So there you go, guys, the AMD R9 380X Sapphire Nitro Edition. Now, I do retain my initial response in the beginning of the video where I said I think it's unique and interesting that they chose a 380X. Maybe it's the fact that there's not a whole lot of market at the $250 range, which is right around when this card comes in, about $249 at the time of this video. NVIDIA doesn't really have anything down there that can compete with this card. I mean, we've got the 950 and the 960. They don't even come close to the performance of this card, but then again, they are as much cheaper than this card as this card is cheaper than, say, the 970. So there's kind of a big gap in performance there, and it looks like AMD just kind of slid this card That looks kind of wrong, doesn't it? And just kind of like slid this card right in there where hopefully you guys are looking at this as being a good stopgap card for 250 bucks. 1080p or 1440p gaming, very, very capable. You guys will notice I also didn't do any 4K benchmarks on this. This is not a 4K card. That would just be a waste of time to even try and do 4K gaming with this card, especially one of them. But anyway, guys, time to get out of here. Thanks for watching today's video. Let me know how you feel about this card. And if you had $250 to spend right now on a graphics card, what card would you buy? Would you buy this one or would you buy something else? Sound off in the comments, tell Sapphire what you think about their card. And as always, guys, I will see you in the next one. Oh, and by the way, have a happy Thanksgiving.